I am very grateful to my recent subscriber but longtime friend Alessandro Tiberti for asking the following stimulating question. How would you describe the current role of education in computer science and computer technology when it comes to morality and ethics? And what do you think that role should be? Welcome to Frank Stajano Explains. I am a professor in the Department of the Science and Technology of Computers at the University of Cambridge, and as such, this issue is quite close to my heart. I'm very excited about computing. I find programming computers to be a very creative and enjoyable activity, albeit sometimes frustrating, like every activity that you pursue at a sufficiently intense level. And I consider myself lucky that the activity I would naturally want to engage in during my spare time is also very useful, practical, and very much in demand in the real world, which allowed me to make a successful career out of it. I'm lucky. We computer people are lucky. Some other people have to choose between doing what they like and doing what puts bread on the table. In my case, the same thing, computing, does both. Great. I transitioned from a research scientist in industry, someone who invents and builds things, to an academic, someone who invents and builds things because the primary duty of a full professor is actually still research, but also someone who teaches others how to do it, because another thing that professors do, even though outside people might believe that it's the main thing they do, is teaching. And so I transitioned from just doing to doing and teaching, and if I teach others how to do it, I potentially have a very significant influence, and it's my duty to use this influence wisely. Nothing under heaven is more important than education. The teaching of one virtuous person can influence many. That which has been learned well by one generation can be passed on to 100. These are the words of Kano Jigoro, the founder of Judo, and they are truly spot on. There's a tremendous responsibility on the shoulders of every educator, whether it's the elementary school teacher who's teaching my young daughter addition and subtraction while I'm here at Trinity recording this video, all the way to the PhD supervisor who teaches a graduate student how to become a scientist and make new discoveries and advance the frontiers of science. Being a professor is not just a job like any other, it's growing and cultivating a new generation of people who will go on and do stuff in the world. And because computer science is the technical foundation of the digital society, the stuff that I and my colleagues teach is particularly influential. The kind of things we teach here at Cambridge and at the other great computer science departments in the world are the kind of people who will go on to create the disruptive startups that will dominate the digital society of tomorrow, challenging and displacing today's giants. Just like way back then, IBM was once displaced by Microsoft, not to mention Google and Facebook and so on, that only a couple of decades ago were just the pet projects of bright computer science students. And so, computer science students, too, have a tremendous responsibility because their computing skills are an incredible superpower. They are the ones who can write code, the ones who can tell the machines how to behave, the ones who can rewrite the laws of physics of the digital society. Most ordinary people are not able to do that, but they can, we can, and it's crucially important that they put that superpower to good use. But during the time they acquire that superpower, while they study computing here at university, their course is technically very intense, and students don't pay much attention to fluffy stuff like morals and ethics unless it makes a difference to the grades they get in their exams. If it's not examinable, it gets ignored. I speak from experience as their professor, and I'm perhaps exaggerating, but only slightly. And I think that's wrong, because we must stimulate those bright young people to think about it, to question what they're doing, to question why they're doing it, to question whether it's right to do it, instead of just doing it and leaving everyone else to live with the consequences. At the start of my research career before my PhD, I worked on pioneering technologies that, if misused, had the potential for privacy violations. And that's when I got into PGP and privacy and security and so on. And although I was only a very small cog in the machine, and it was easy to tell me to shut up, I was quite insistent on incorporating all sorts of checks and safeguards. And I witnessed firsthand the pressure in such an environment to be the first ones to come up with a result, with a novel prototype, the original paper. And if you worried too much about privacy, then you would be overtaken by your competitors who didn't, and just went ahead and did the stuff without any of those safeguards and got there more quickly than you. And the message was, if we don't do it because we are too principled, someone else will do it anyway. Would you have ever imagined in 1990 that people would later accept to be tagged like cows with a transponder that continuously monitored their location anywhere they went? Or that they would accept to be outfitted with a microphone that can be remotely activated without them noticing, and that they would voluntarily carry that microphone anywhere they went, including to very private meetings? It turns out that people don't seem to care, and that if you entice them with the right incentives, they'll happily do this and much more. And if you raise concerns about this, you're branded as paranoid. But I digress. Let me get back on track. When I was an undergraduate at the Università La Sapienza in Rome, I had the good fortune of being taught by several outstanding professors. One of them stood out head and shoulders above all others, Professor Corrado Mencuccini, who taught us first year and second year physics. He was incredibly charismatic and inspiring. Our engineering course was very tough and it had a very high mortality rate. Only a small fraction of those who matriculated ended up finishing the course. But he was the one who motivated us and taught us how to keep going. And his last lecture at the end of the second year was unforgettable. He made us think why we were training to become engineers, what we could do in the world and to the world as engineers, what problems we would have to face over the next 40 years of our career, and how it was our responsibility and our duty to do something about them. So, when I became a university professor myself many years later, I figured I had in turn to pass on the message from my mentor, and so at the end of my first year course, I do tell my students that they have this superpower and it's their duty to use it for good. And you may watch that lecture up there because I'm making the entire course available for free here on my channel. But my Cambridge course is pretty dense. I have only 12 hours to cover a big syllabus of algorithms and data structures, and I must consciously make a point of leaving some 20 minutes at the end so as to be able to address the students on something that is not technically part of the algorithm syllabus. It's not examinable, but is in fact arguably more important than all the rest I'm teaching them. This is in fact also one of the reasons why I continue to run this channel, so that I can talk to my students and to anyone else who cares about other stuff that I think is important, but that I might not be able to fit into the lecturing hours that I have been allocated. So I think that people who study computing at university level have an enormous responsibility because the skills they acquire give them the ability to change the world. And also that educators have an enormous responsibility because they shape the minds of the next generation, as Kano-sensei said. And therefore, that professors of computer science have an enormous responsibility squared. And I take this very seriously. And we have a moral imperative to inspire the students that this superpower they're acquiring must be used for the good of humanity. I don't think we are doing enough in that sense, but I also don't think that making it a mandatory requirement of the curriculum is going to do much good, because it would then become just a box-ticking exercise. Have you done the moral and ethics? Okay, pass, done, next. So that would be worse than useless. In my view, the most important role of university educators is to teach students to think critically, questioning every assumption, evaluating the worth of any statement on the basis of evidence, whether by proof or by experiment, rather than on the basis of reputation or authority. And I must say, I am witnessing a disturbing trend in the last few years, whereby arrogant and self-righteous people try to tell other people what they can and cannot say. You cannot talk about this because it's offensive to this class of people. It used to be that universities were the temples of free speech. But now it seems you can no longer really speak freely, because if you express opinions that certain groups find objectionable, then you can be banned. You can even lose your job. That is totally wrong-headed in my opinion, and a serious threat to the intellectual freedom and honesty that is necessary for the progress of humanity. So I, for one, will continue to convey to my students that they have to think with their own head, that they have to be prepared to question every assumption, to say rude things. That's the way new science is made. And they have to figure out what their true values are and then stand up for them even when it becomes inconvenient and uncomfortable. And they have to realize that the skills and the know-how they acquire in the course of their STEM degree can make a big difference in the world of tomorrow, for good or for bad. And that it's up to them to decide what this difference shall be, in which direction, and that if they just apply their unique skill set to do what they're told, and they just let things happen, they may be complicit in far-reaching, disastrous changes. I believe a crucial role of university educators is to stimulate students to think clearly with their own head, as I said, so that they can come up with their own conclusions, even if their views are radical and controversial and considered wrong by others, and that it is in this intellectual context that brave critical thinkers like the ones cited by Alessandro in the rest of his comment can emerge. What do you think the role of university education should be with regards to morals and ethics, especially in technology? Share your views in the comments and say Socrates to signal that you were here until the end. Thank you.